What's up, y'all, and welcome to the channel. My name is Philip Torvik. Today I want to go over creating a classic synthwave 80s bass line using the Behringer Poly D. It's one of my favorite synths that I own. I did go into a pretty good amount of depth on this synth in another video that I'll link in my description, but I do still want to go over some of the basics of the features of this synth so that we can tackle creating this sequenced bass line and get into the tonal qualities of this amazing synth. So like I mentioned before, this is the Behringer Poly D. This is essentially Behringer's Mini Moog Model D clone that they created some years back. There are, of course, some major key differences. Just to name a few would be the distortion channel, the chorus circuitry here, which is like emulating a Juno 106 or Juno 60 chorus, kind of like we have down here. Of course, you have a fourth oscillator with oscillator control, a sequencer, and an arpeggiator, stuff like that. But just to bullet point a few things for the sake of this video and what we're going to do today, the Behringer Poly D has 4 oscillators. Each oscillator has 6 waveform selections, the fourth oscillator having oscillator control, allowing you to maintain pitch for that oscillator and it not follow the sequences or anything that you play on the keybed. Right here in the middle is your mixer section for the Poly D. So you have a volume knob for each one of the 4 oscillators, and of course an on and off switch for each of those oscillators as well as an on and off switch and volume knob for your noise generator right here, which can switch between white or pink noise. Over here we have our envelope and filter section, our distortion channel, our chorus circuit, as well as our sequencer and arpeggiator right down here. Over here we do have additional controls that I'll go into a little bit more in depth in a different video, but this would include your switches between mono, unison, and poly, your portamento controls and glide, LFO rates, of course your modulation wheel, and your pitch control over here as well. But let's get into creating this synthwave bass sequence on the Poly D. If you enjoy content like this and you would like to see more in-depth synthesis videos on any of the different synths that I have here in the studio, please make sure that you subscribe, like this video, and share it with other creators in synthesis that would love this kind of content. First and foremost, I'm starting with chorus off and my filter pretty wide open, especially my cutoff here. I'm not getting any resonance from emphasis. I'm keeping this pretty wide open right now so we can just hear a bit more of the raw signal. And of course, as we get into this, we'll affect this sound a bit more. Another quick thing I wanted to note, if I didn't mention this earlier, is that this is a 4-voice paraphonic synthesizer, which means I can switch into poly mode and attribute a voice to each one of these 4 oscillators, allowing me to build out pads and chords that I wouldn't typically be able to do on a strictly monophonic synthesizer. So let's get into this bass sequence. We're going to start from the top down. I'm going to take my first oscillator, put it at a 32 stop range, and switch it to a sawtooth waveform. So let's turn on oscillator 1 and see how this sounds. Nothing at all wrong with that. That already sounds pretty beefy, but let's get into shaping this sound just a little bit more. The first thing I'm going to do here in my amp section, or my loudness contour, is keep the decay on and give it just a little bit of decay here so that I don't have to hold out these notes in order to create the sequence or the bass line. I can play once and have a little bit of that classic 80s synth bass decay. Go a little bit lower, just a bit. I just want a little bit of edge to it. Right there is great for now. Now, because this cutoff frequency is all the way at the top, in this case, this is a low pass filter. Because it's all the way at the top, you're not hearing really any of the effects of the filter because this envelope is wide open all the time. So you're not hearing any of the movement of the envelope itself. And I would like to change that in order to give this sound a bit more beef and a bit more character. I want a little movement to the sound. I don't want it to feel so rigid like we have it now. This is very straightforward sawtooth, but there's no opening and closing of these filters that gives it character. So what I'm going to do first is just drop this cutoff frequency to about halfway so I can start to hear the effects of the filter and the envelope and start to characterize the sound just a little bit more by adjusting some of these settings. Let's bring up this decay just a little bit because right now it's just like the filter's at halfway and it's just there and it's closed and it's a bit sterile. I want it to have a bit of movement to it, so I'm going to bring this up slightly. You hear that slight amount of decay from that filter closing. since we're at halfway here. So you get that little bit of bend towards the end of the sound. That's exactly what I'm looking for from this decay right here. Let's go a little shorter on our decay on our amp section. Now, if I push this attack right here, this envelope is going to open very slowly to reach this frequency point of the cutoff. Get that little wow effect from here. I don't really want that right now, but I did just want to showcase that. If you're looking for that almost brassy wow effect here, you're going to want to allow a little bit of time for that filter to open, and then a bit of time on the decay for that filter to hold and close. That'll give you a little bit more character, especially once we get into chorusing and having multiple voices and multiple oscillators that are targeting that. But for now, let's bring this all the way back down so that this is pretty strict and sharp and transient at the beginning of that signal, but then it decays and morphs at the end to give us a little bit of that filter that we're looking for. I want it to move pretty quick. Now we can drop this down to taste. This is already sounding pretty fantastic. Let's lower this slightly. Now to me, this is kind of the fun part where the core sound that we're looking for is established. We have a low, subby, sawtooth waveform with a little bit of a filter on it and a pretty tight decay to give us that sharp 80s synthwave bass sound that we love. Now we can go through these other oscillators to give it a bit more presence and weight. We'll get into some detuning, and then of course we'll top it off with a chorus and a sequence to give this the life that it deserves. Let's get into oscillator number 2. So oscillator number 2, I also want to match it at a 32 stop. It's going to be the exact same octave as the low one here. Right now it's a triangle, so we're going to switch this to a sawtooth waveform as well. So these are essentially doing nearly the exact same thing. I'm going to switch this on. This is already mixed all the way, and then we can turn it down to taste. But what I want to do with oscillator number 2 is I'm actually going to detune it slightly to create some chorusing, to create some frequency rub that is going to give it that big, massive wall of sound stack, even with the low filter that we're looking for. So let's play this now. Already has a beautiful texture to it. Now, if I put it spot on here, I'm going to open up so we can hear this a little bit more distinctly. So I'm going to open up this cutoff right here. That sounds fine. You get a little bit of rub right there, but I want a bit more of a heavier detune. So we're going to drop this down just a bit. That's a nice detune right there. We drop that down. Let's let this decay a little bit now that we're just shaping the tone. Let's tighten up the filter. Now using just one more oscillator, oscillator number 3, let's give this a little bit more high end, a little bit more bite. So we're going to go to oscillator number 3. Once again, I'm going to keep this as a sawtooth waveform. Of course, you can mix and match these however you want to create a tone and a texture that matches the exact record that you're working on. But in this case, we're going to a 16 stop octave, a slight detune at a sawtooth. Let's turn on oscillator number 3 and see what we're dealing with. With it off. High octave gives it a little bit more life and a bit more weight because now you have a chorus of oscillators that are working together to create the sound, which will only be amplified when we add in the circuit number 1 of this course, which is again going to duplicate signal, offer some width and a bit more frequency rub that it's just going to take this signal to the next level. I'm really loving where the sound is at so far, but one thing that I'm running into is the higher I get on this key bed, the more I am hit with that transience and that sharpness, especially from the high oscillator, but largely just because our attack is so low. So you're getting a lot of that punch and that snap from the signal. One way you can help kind of mitigate this is turn off keyboard control for this filter. That way, the higher you go, it's not trying to maintain that sharpness, but it'll slightly dull that signal the higher you go instead of trying to maintain that presence all the way through. So this is with it on. You hear that snappiness, I turn that off. that feels a lot more palatable and a bit more controllable as far as like getting this mixed into a song where you have a really nice Moog style bass underneath the core of a synthwave record, and you don't need this snappiness, punching through the mix and resonating. You want it to fit a little bit more cohesively. Utilizing keyboard control in a creative way or in a way that just makes sense per song and per sound that you're designing can be really, really helpful. Now, the last little thing that I want to do here, this sound is largely where I want it to be. We're going to turn on circuit number 1 for the chorus. Immediately, you're going to hear this sound come to life. You're going to hear the stereo image open up. You're obviously going to hear the chorusing of all of the 3 oscillators that we have set right now. That sounds gorgeous. Let's tighten it up a little bit. Let's just shape a bit. Now that we have set our bass sound, which of course you can adjust from here to taste to make sure it fits your song, let's get into sequencing. I'm going to do the most basic version of this because there are a lot of controls and things that you can do to make this even more in-depth, which again, there's infinite videos we can do on that if that is something that would interest you. And in fact, if there are any specific features or specific synths that we have here that you would like to dig a little bit more into, let me know down in the comments. That way we can dig a little bit deeper into whatever y'all are most interested in. But let's get to sequencing. All we're going to do, we have 32 stops here, so we have some room to play. We're going to hit record, play 32 notes, hit record again, then we have our sequence. We can, of course, adjust our tempo here, right here. We'll start fast, and then we'll kind of dial in exactly where we want to be, and then you just hit play, and you're ready to go. Now, just to bring home this entire sound, let's play this sequence with a nice 80s synthwave detune lead over here on the Korg Minilog, just to bring home how this would fit, at least partially, into some sort of song structure. Let's see how it sounds. So that is how you can create an 80s dark synthwave bass sequence on the Behringer Poly D. I've had the synth for a couple of years now, and it has not treated me wrong. There's so much flexibility in this station right here that I find myself going to it consistently. Nearly every record that I produce has this layered in there somehow. I mean, it's the same with a lot of my other synths that I have here, but I've not been treated poorly at all by the Behringer Poly D. So if you have ever been interested in using this synth or getting one for yourself, for what it does, I do find it to have great build quality and to be very affordable for the amount of flexibility that it has. Thank y'all once again so much for supporting this channel, for following. If you do want to see more videos that have to do with synthesis and the different synthesizers that I have here in my studio, please make sure that you comment below. As always, make sure that you are subscribed, make sure that you have liked and you have shared this video with someone that would be interested, and we'll see y'all next time. Peace.